welcome to the latest episode of TNC's Down the Wire podcast. As some of you may know by now, my name is Craig and Clare, I'm the CTO at Network Collective, and I'm going to be your host for the next 20 or so minutes. I'm delighted to be joined today by my colleague Clare Tyndall, who's one of TNC's principal consultants. Clare, would you like to take a quick minute to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi Craig. I'm Clare Tyndall. I'm principal consultant at the Network Collective. As you've just said, I've been at TNC 11 years, and prior to that, I was about a dozen years in telecoms on the account management side of things. So at TNC, I work with some of our biggest customers in terms of strategy for voice, networking, mobile, and in particular, been involved with quite a number of these types of services that we're going to discuss today and the strategy for those. So looking forward to chatting about it.
Excellent. It's great to have you on, Clare. I think this is your first time, is it? On
it is.
Excellent. Well, welcome to the podcast. Okay, so before we get into the topic today, I just want to really quickly remind everybody about TNC and our key credentials. So TNC, what do we do? So we are the UK's largest independent telecoms professional service consultancy. We support just over 280 major UK and multinational organisations, deliver effectively a full life cycle of strategy, sourcing, deployment, in-life managed services, things like billing management, vendor management, in-life management and service management, all types of network and telecom services. So yeah, if you've got any services that doing in network and telecoms, we're the guys. So I guess, right, without further ado, Clare, today's topic, UCaaS versus CCaaS versus CPaaS. Easy enough for me to say. That's a lot of acronyms, but these are kind of words that we're hearing a lot from our customers, and I guess the underlying solutions that these acronyms represent are starting to have a kind of huge impact on the market and a lot of the strategies and sourcing processes that we're running. So I guess let's start with the basics. In a nutshell, I guess what are these things? What are the core principles of UCaaS, CPaaS, and CPaaS?
Okay, so first of all, let's demystify the acronyms. So we're talking about UCaaS, Unified Comms as a Service. So that's typically the way of communicating many of us have become very used to over the past year in particular. Like we're doing now, video calling, voice calling, sharing of documentation, and so a unified communications platform that typically sits within the cloud. So that's the as a service part. Contact center as a service. So that's obviously, I think, traditionally contact center, people might have thought about banks of people in headsets. They're ready to answer your calls. These days, it's a great deal more sophisticated in how customers are being served. So it's all ways of contacting your client base. And again, in the cloud, typically subscription-based, far richer features than we would have seen in the past. It goes way beyond call forwarding, call recording, etc. Now, and we'll come onto those types of features later on today. And then CPaaS is communication platform as a service, and that's really the complete toolkit of being able to combine those areas and those channels and ways of communicating both internally and externally with your customers. It's very flexible and agile way of approaching the solution, and might give you the richest set of features in terms of that communication. So in a nutshell, across those three sets of acronyms, we're talking about ways to communicate essentially, and largely based in the cloud.
Yeah, I was going to say, Clare, I think the commonality there is these are cloud-based services, and kind of following the as-a-service model, and the kind of what we're seeing from an application, a compute point of view. This is a communication service, which is effectively an application that's been now elevated into the cloud and consumed as a subscription service, which is great from a flexibility point of view. So that's really, really good. I guess you touched upon a couple of points there around the way we're communicating now, the way we've been communicating over the last year or so. Is that the only reason why this is a hot topic now, or are there other things in the mix that's kind of driving people to move some of these traditional on-prem type services, I guess, out into the cloud? What are the key drivers around this?
Yeah, it's a whole range of reasons why this is now becoming a hot topic. So the needs of customers, and this is right across the demographic base, are rapidly shifting at the moment. Customers want to be able to have the complete customer journey, their end-to-end experience, to be easy and seamless with organisations. And organisations really recognise this and recognise that in order to get the greatest leverage from their customer relationships and the most competitive advantage, they need to be addressing this. So the customer needs and the rapidly changing patterns of how customers want to engage with organisations is probably the biggest key driver of this. It needs to be via all types of channels, phone, video, chat, email, social media platforms, and then that customer journey might need to travel between the back office and the front office and the contact centre. So it needs to be a really flexible, agile service. If you're going to be putting all that important customer engagement onto a single platform and going to one of these as a service, it needs to have operational resilience as well. So that's another factor that as a service type solutions can really address. So that's another key driver. And organisations within the marketplace that deal in these services and some of the more traditional telecoms companies are really recognising the drive and the need for these services. So that competitive UK landscape, when it comes to these ways of communicating, is another factor that means we've got a real revolution in terms of the types of solutions that are available, the price points that they're coming at, the features that are inherent within them. It's it's a really exciting time in terms of the market conditions.
I guess, I mean, it's really interesting stuff, Claire, and I think maybe some of the other external factors like the demographic now and the way people communicate using smartphones, and obviously being the expectations, I guess, as well of consumers these days to be able to interact and engage with customers through different methods. So that kind of digital engagement piece, not necessarily just coming directly in through the telephone channel, being able to interact through, Twitter or Facebook or Messenger. The demographics driving that, I think, and maybe the consumerization of some of this IT is also maybe changing the approach organizations need to consume or provide these services for their customer base. Is that kind of what we're seeing?
Yeah, that's definitely what we're seeing. I mean, I think we're not going to get into the details of this today, but we've seen some really interesting shift in terms of the percentages of customer interactions that used to be by phone that are now occurring via chat, via social media, and there's increasingly a push by organisations to try and ensure customers are doing more self-serve, more digital engagement. So because that's a far more efficient model and can often be an enhanced experience for the customer as well. So that digital engagement is also really driving the change in customer behaviour. That's in turn driving the changes within the marketplace. And it's all too easy to see how that digital engagement is increasingly going to bring things like AI into the mix. And that's going to be the next big growth area in this space. So it's a really exciting time.
So I guess when we are particularly focusing on the as a service type capabilities in comparison to maybe some of the traditional, even legacy type platforms around, if we focus on contact center, I guess, when we do talk about these alternative channels, the as a service model, effectively the entry into being able to trial and test them channels is much easier than what it would be in a traditional model, where it's fairly infrastructure led, quite costly to add things like web chat or social interaction. Whereas I guess in an as a service model, it's we'll subscribe to that service, we'll test it out, we'll see how it goes, and if it's no good, we'll take it back out again. Is that kind of a model why we're seeing an attraction to as a service?
Yeah, I think so. You've hit the nail on the head there, I think, really, Craig, in terms of the fact that it's an incredibly agile and flexible way of deploying these services. So we quite often see customers approaching this in a very modular way, and perhaps going in initially, exactly as you said, to sort of trialing this on certain campaigns, maybe even, or for certain sections of the company, and maybe even first initially on an internal help desk, and then to external customer communications, adding social media and chat bots where they might start first of all with messaging, for example, and you can build these things up gradually. So it's a very flexible, potentially, way of approaching it, and a far more agile way of approaching it than having a big investment in equipment that's sitting on premise to be updated and so forth. It's a completely different way of approaching it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, well, let's stay on the topic of the contact center then for now, and look at the kind of as a service models there. So we've talked about CCaaS and we've talked about CPaaS. Obviously, there's some differences there. Do you want to kind of give us a little bit more insight into what are the key differences between them two variations? But then I guess the commonalities in terms of the, let's call them modern contact center capabilities. What we see in these platforms effectively, what do these platforms bring to a customer effectively?
Okay, so contact center as a service. So we've touched on some of these things already. Contact center as a service is generally procured and used by companies by going with one organization that's delivering all their contact center needs. So they're delivering those needs from the cloud, as we've discussed, and that's going to cover things like interaction with their CRM tools, as we've talked about, social media, chat, being able to track the customer journey. It's going to have nice things like supervisor capability in order to track the agent. It's going to have workforce management. So it's going to be a total service for managing your contact center, and it will have a lot of customer experience elements rolled into it. And you'll be engaging with a particular contact center as a service provider, and that's how it would work. I think the next step on from that is CPaaS, the communications platform as a service that we've talked about. We describe that as a toolkit or sort of pure play type of service before. That might be where an organization wants to get more hands-on with how it programs and how it makes its approach to, we use the term omnichannel a lot when we talk about contact center as a service and CPaaS. So it's about being able to program and modify the service to really fit the customer needs. Yeah. Very programmable and flexible model when it comes to CPaaS, as opposed to the total service solution that is contact center as a service. Hopefully that helps clear that up.
Yeah, no, I think that's good. I mean, I always kind of think of these things as, CCaaS is like it's like a package type of solution. So yeah, if you select what you want from the menu and you effectively take it as a package from a single service provider, whereas CPaaS is as you mentioned, it's more of a toolkit type capability, and you usually need to have your own development team and you kind of bespoke it to your needs. So it could be one component like a web chat bot, or it could be an outbound dialer and effectively integrates into maybe some other platforms. And the difference between the two is obviously one's more flexible in terms of how you use it and consume it, whereas the other is more of a traditional sort of contracted service where it's packaged and you take the whole set of capabilities into I guess a single contract. Yes, that's really interesting. Good overview.
Yeah. Okay. And I think while we're talking about contact center, and we mentioned that omnichannel, we also mentioned about knitting the various capabilities together. It's probably just worth spending a moment so that people understand that there's various ways of interacting and knitting these channels together. Quite often we have clients that have multiple channels and ways of communicating with their customers. So email will be separate from a messaging system, which might be separate from the voice recording system, which might be separate from app development. And we have customers that are starting to pull those channels together, and then they're having a sort of multi-channel experience where the data might interact between those various different channels. And so they start to get some some kind of an idea. Where customers are trying to get themselves into the space is omnichannel, where there's total data integration, there's a real understanding of the customer. And really, as you consider these different models, CCaaS, CPaaS, how much you integrate them, the greater you can move towards that integrated omnichannel model where all your channels are working together, where you've got that customer data and tracking it through the whole, all the channels and ways of interacting. That's really the holy grail of understanding for particularly our retail customers. But all types of organisations are higher education customers or public sector customers. There's kind of no type of organisation that doesn't want that deeply knitted understanding of the customer journey and the data that's contained within that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Claire. That's a really good overview. I think it's particularly the difference between multiple channel and multi-channel. I think there's a lot of misconception in from the customer base and across the market around the difference between them two. So it's really good to hear that. Okay, let's move on. Conscious of time. So we've talked a lot about contact center. Let's talk a little bit about unified comms as a service then, and kind of what we're seeing in the market here. I think we see two key approaches, don't we? So I won't spoil it for you. I'll let you crack on and talk through that.
Yeah, that's fine. I think that probably quite a lot of people won't be surprised at the two key approaches here. It's impossible to mention unified comms, UCaaS as a service without mentioning Teams. Obviously, the Microsoft product then as part of the Microsoft suite is the biggest player that we see in terms of enterprise business. And that's obviously a massive factor within the marketplace. We've recently seen Microsoft release APIs for Teams so that contact center can increasingly integrate with Teams. And the more that we can see native capability connected with Teams, the more interesting that whole area is going to be in terms of providing a service that our clients were already familiar with and that they can use and that could maybe integrate and knit into other services as they come along. So obviously Teams is a massive part of the UCaaS marketplace, but it's not the only player. There's a lot of we term them pure play solutions, one of which I'm sure many people have become familiar with over the past year, an incredible story, Zoom, increasingly seen again in the enterprise business space, but a number of other players as well, such as Ring Central, 8x8 and various others. So this capability to be able to video, meet, chat, etc. That communications platform space is also really, really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's kind of circling back to the reasons for change around this. Obviously Teams across much of our customer base is being rolled out. It's highly penetrated and people are using it for internal calling, but I guess now it's extending out to look at, well, in this new world of hybrid working, where people still potentially need to call externally or interface externally to other organisations, Teams potentially is a driver for that, but then taking into account that there are other services out there which can either stand natively, stand alone, or increasingly can integrate with Teams as well. I think that's a really interesting thing to watch over the next year or two to see what happens to some of them traditional services as well. The on-prem PBXs and things like that will probably start disappearing, I would think. Okay, yeah. But I'm very conscious of time, so we do need to kind of get to the last topic, which is, so what do we do next? What are customers doing about this? What approaches are they taking to really understand what they need to do around this call as a service type capability?
Yeah, absolutely. So in common with a lot of other areas of telecom strategy, you need to understand your requirements. So in this case, you need to understand your customer requirements and how you're going to approach the customer. So we've already talked a lot already about the sort of channels that you want to use to approach your customer and how you want to get insights and data into what your customer, that insight and that data analysis as to how your customer is behaving and the customer journey. You increasingly want to assist them with self-serve, etc. So understanding your strategy in that place and how you want to interact, where you are currently with those channels and how you want to use them in the future, what requirements you have for that is essential. And then you'll start to think about how advanced you are in terms of, do you want to go for a CPaaS strategy? Do you want to engage with and do you have the needs for contact center as a service, etc. So that will lead you to how you're going to integrate your channels together and the approach you're going to use. And then it will be about your people and processes internally, the types of operating model that you want to use for this. So understanding all of those requirements, where you are in terms of your customer interaction channels and where you want to be. Those are the starting blocks really, in order to get you underway with really coming up with the best solution for this, because it's a really exciting time, as we talked about, in the marketplace for these types of solutions. And taking those next steps are going to put you in the best place to be ready for it.
That's great, Claire. Thank you very much. We have unfortunately run out of time. I know we could talk about this stuff for a lot longer, and I'm sure we will do in future episodes of the podcast. But yeah, thank you very much for your interesting insights. Very good. And yeah, thank you everyone for listening. Please do let us know if there's any questions that you've got about this or any other topics. You can obviously get in touch with us through the website or any of the social channels that we're available on. And we look forward to talking to you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Thanks.